If you work in a modern office environment, there's a good chance Outlook is open on your screen almost the entire day. Emails come in constantly, meetings fill your calendar, and tasks seem to be everywhere. Reminders pop up, you flag items and set follow-ups. But despite using Outlook all day, many professionals, and maybe you too, feel that there is untapped potential. You answer emails, attend meetings, deal with requests, and at the end of the day, you wonder whether Outlook could actually do a lot more of the heavy lifting for you. And the short answer is absolutely. I love Outlook because I know how powerful it is. It already has everything you need to manage your email, your tasks, and your time in one place. And once you connect those pieces intentionally, Outlook becomes something much bigger than just an email tool. It becomes the command center that actually runs your workday. I've been working with Microsoft tools for about 15 years, always on the hunt for the most efficient workflows, and over the last couple of years, millions of professionals have learned from my YouTube channel how to use Microsoft 365 more effectively. And one of the things I've noticed again and again is that Outlook has so much more to offer than most people realize. So in this video, I want to show you the exact Outlook setup that runs my workday. And this is not about shortcuts or magic tricks. It's the structure that I have built for myself over the years and that allows emails, tasks, and the calendar to work together so that nothing important slips through the cracks. But let's start with the foundation. Outlook already gives you an inbox for communication, flags, and reminders for tasks, and a calendar for planning your time. They are exactly the right building blocks, and honestly, they are more than most people ever need. I believe the opportunity most professionals miss is connecting them. When your inbox, your tasks, and your calendar work as one structure instead of three separate pieces, something shifts. You stop wondering where things are, you stop wondering about what you might have missed or lost. But you start each day knowing exactly what it's for. So that's the setup I want to walk you through today, and it starts with 3 simple principles. The Outlook setup that runs my workday is built around a very simple principle. Email is communication. Tasks are commitments, and the calendar protects execution. So you move away from reaction towards proaction, from simply responding to whatever appears next, to deliberately deciding what deserves your time and attention. And once you understand that relationship, Outlook becomes much easier to manage. Let's start with email. For many professionals, the inbox slowly turns into a storage space for work that hasn't been decided yet, for which you're waiting a response, or for information that might become important at some point in the future. So emails stay in the inbox because they require action, because they might become relevant later, or simply because there hasn't been time to deal with them. And over time, the inbox just becomes a list of unresolved decisions and actions. But in my setup, the inbox has only one purpose. As I said, communication. So when an email arrives, one of the 3 things happens. If the email takes less than a minute or 2 to deal with, I simply handle it immediately. And that might mean replying, forwarding it to someone else, or sending a quick confirmation. And if the email doesn't require an action at all, it gets filed or archived right away. And if the email represents work that needs to be done later, it does not just stay in the inbox. Instead, the action becomes a task. And that basically means that I deliberately extract the action from the message and turn it into a clearly defined task. So if it's something just for myself, I usually flag the email and thus turn it into a Microsoft to-do task. But if the task and context is not just for me, but for someone else or my team as well, I usually create a task on a shared planner board immediately. By the way, Microsoft is kindly sponsoring this video, but you know I'd be using their products and Copilot anyway. So here are some of my favorite ways it fits into this setup. Now, these three decisions that we've just discussed sound simple, but in practice, the hardest part is often just figuring out what an email actually requires, especially when the thread is long or the request is buried somewhere in the middle. And that's where Copilot in Microsoft Outlook has become genuinely useful for me. So let me show you two concrete examples that I really love. The first is summarizing emails. I mean, let's say I receive a project update thread with several replies. Even with conversation view enabled, it can get difficult when many people and different viewpoints are involved. So instead of scrolling through the entire chain, Copilot gives me an easy solution. I open the email and click Summarize at the top of the email header or within the drop-down when clicking on the Copilot button in the ribbon. Copilot gives me a short summary of the thread. Who said what was decided, what's still open. And I love that it reads like someone giving me the summary verbally and not just some random bullets. This option saves me up to 5 or more minutes per email, and more importantly, it helps me make the triage decision much faster. Do I need to act, or can I file this and move on? The second example is drafting replies or entire emails. With reply or email open, either click the Copilot button in the ribbon and select reply, or click the pen icon to open Copilot directly in the email body. And then I type a prompt, something like, use a professional and warm tone consistent with my previous emails to Amanda. Confirm I'm happy with the scope and the executive summary is fine. And then ask her to go ahead and send the proposal by Thursday. But also ask her to check with Marco which dates in the next 2 weeks would work for project kickoff call. Then Copilot generates a full reply based on that prompt and the email context. Honestly, the output is usually so good, I barely need to adjust anything. Most of the time, I just review and click send. What would normally take a few minutes and a lot of mental effort is done in 30 seconds. And both features work on desktop and mobile, so the workflow stays the same whether I'm at my desk or processing emails on my phone between meetings. And what I really love is that Copilot fits perfectly into the principle behind my setup. The decision is still the same. Handle it now, file it, or turn it into a task. Copilot just helps me get there faster and execute more quickly and with less mental effort when I need to do so. So if you want to start saving serious time with every single email, start using Copilot in Microsoft Outlook today. Scan the QR code on the screen to get started right away. I've also put a direct link in the description below. And that brings us to the second part of my system, tasks. As I said, tasks represent commitments. A task means that something needs to happen and that you are responsible for making sure it's done, either by your own or by delegating it to someone else. But it's usually your responsibility in the first place. One of the most common mistakes I see is that tasks end up scattered across Outlook, other tools, or maybe even worse, other non-Microsoft tools. So some tasks are hidden inside flagged emails, some live in a separate, maybe third-party task list, some are written down in notes or meeting minutes. But when tasks are spread across different places, the system loses clarity and you lose control and direction because you don't know where things are. In my setup, tasks exist in just one place, but technically in many since I'm using Microsoft 365. So let me explain. As I said before, when an email requires action later, the action becomes a task. So I flag the email and then adjust the details of the task if necessary, for example, by setting a due date or adding a short description of the action. Alternatively, if the work is not directly tied to the email itself, I create a separate Outlook task so it stands on its own. In both cases, the result is the same. The commitment now appears in my central task list. In a Microsoft 365 environment, this task is visible not only in Outlook, but also in Microsoft To Do and even Planner. This means I can review, prioritize, or adjust the task from any of these tools while everything stays perfectly synchronized across the system whenever I change an attribute. And this is important because a task list is not meant to represent everything you could possibly do. It represents the commitments you've accepted. And once those commitments are visible in one place, the next step becomes much easier. That step is deciding when the work will actually happen. Which brings us to the third part of my system, the calendar. For many people, the Outlook calendar is simply a schedule of meetings, but meetings are only one part of your workday. The other part, and sometimes the one that is actually more important and where actual progress happens, is focused work. If your calendar only shows meetings but not the work required to prepare for them, follow up afterward, or complete your responsibilities, then your calendar doesn't reflect reality. So in my Outlook setup, my calendar is a perfect mirror of my actual day and, more importantly, also protects execution and does not only facilitate exchange in meetings. That means that not only meetings are scheduled there, of course, but so is focused work and my breaks. If something requires real concentration or a significant effort, which is actually most items in your task list, I guess, since the quick 2-minute items were already handled when the email arrived, I don't leave it sitting in the task list indefinitely. Instead, I deliberately block time for it in my calendar so it has a clear place in my day. That might be time to prepare for an important meeting, time to review documents, time to work on a project that requires deep focus, or anything alike. And once that time is reserved in the calendar, the task list and the calendar start working together. Unfortunately, there's no direct automatic connection between your Microsoft To-Do task list or planner and the calendar. So when I block time for a task, I usually give the calendar block the same name as the task has. This creates a simple visual link between the two. So when I look at my calendar, I immediately know which task that time block is meant for. So in short, the task defines what needs to be done and your calendar defines when it will be done. And that small change in your workflow removes a surprising amount of friction. Because instead of constantly asking yourself, when will I do this or when will I have time to do this, the decision has already been made. And now your day has a clear structure. But the final piece of the system is how everything runs on a daily basis and actually becomes alive. Ideally, most of the planning has already happened the evening before. So at the end of the day, I quickly review my tasks and schedule for most important work for the next day so that the calendar already reflects what tomorrow should look like. So when the next morning starts and I open my laptop, I don't need to plan everything from scratch. I simply take a look at two things: the calendar and my task list. The calendar shows me how my day is structured. So which meetings are coming up, where time for focused work already exists, and what commitments are already reserved. And the task list shows the remaining responsibilities that still need attention. Maybe not on this day, but over the coming ones. And from there, I usually only need to make small adjustments if necessary, moving a task if something more important pops up, adjusting a block of time, or preparing for something more important or urgent. During the day, I usually process emails in small batches rather than constantly. Tasks are completed during the time blocks that have been reserved for them, and meetings happen when they are scheduled. And because the system separates communication, commitments, and execution, it becomes much easier to stay focused. At the end of the day, I usually take a quick moment to look at tomorrow's calendar again and confirm that the important tasks are already accounted for. And similarly, I usually plan the next week on Friday afternoon, so I have at least like 60 or 70% of the work already scheduled and do not have to start from scratch on Monday morning. These small habits ensure that the next morning or week starts with clarity rather than confusion. And when these three elements, emails, tasks, and calendar, are aligned, Outlook becomes much calmer. You no longer rely on your memory to keep track of everything. That's why this Outlook setup works so well for busy professionals just like you and me. It removes the constant feeling that something might be slipping through the cracks, and instead of reacting to everything that appears in the inbox, you start the day knowing what today is actually for. For those of you that already have a Microsoft 365 subscription, get the most out of your Outlook by using Copilot in Outlook. And if you want Outlook to feel even lighter and easier to use, the next step is simplifying how you interact with it throughout the day. So watch this video next, where I'll show you some of my favorite Outlook productivity tips and tricks that look almost too simple to matter, but quietly remove a lot of friction from your workday.